Headliner Nation, what's going on? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and I've got 9 running backs that are causing some issues and some tough draft day decisions. That second tier of running backs right now, not McCaffrey or Barkley or Zeke, not the guys going at the beginning of the first round, but the second tier of running backs that you're seeing go anywhere from the middle of the first to the end of the second are causing a lot of confusion. And I get questions all the time about these guys. Kyle, I gotta pick that's in the middle of the first, or I gotta pick that's at the end of the first. These are the guys I kind of like, but I really don't know what to do because they're so close in value, and that is true. A lot of these guys are really, really close this year. So this episode is all about helping you make some tough draft day decisions on which early round running back you should be investing in. Now, because this video has 9 different players, we're going to be doing the pros and cons to each one. We're not going to be doing some deep diving statistical overview that we do in a lot of our videos. But almost every single one of these running backs on this video, we've covered in a deep diving video already. So down in the description of the video below, I am going to include the name of the player and the link to the specific video in which we talk about them. So when you get done with this video, if you need more information on any of these guys, go down and find their name below in the description of the video, and you can click on that link and it's going to take you to that episode. So don't forget that. Now here's the thing. When we are talking about this many players, we got to work our way through the weeds a little bit, right? It's really thick right now. There's a whole lot of information that we're trying to work through, and it's getting to be a little bit much. Now, because of what I do for fantasy football, I can help you work through these weeds. But if you're dealing with some other weeds of your own, there's another expert out there to help you with that. And those are the experts over at Manscaped. If you need help trimming your weeds up, then you need to go get yourself the Lawnmower 3.0 or any of the other amazing products from Manscaped. And if you were to go over to their website right now, manscaped.com, and use the promo code Headliners, all capital letters, you are going to get 20% off any of their great products. So again, if you need any help manscaping, Manscaped is the place to get whatever you need. So let's talk about these 9 running backs and discuss who we should be taking in the early rounds at that position. So again, I've got 9 guys that we are going to take a look at today. Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Acron Jones, Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, Austin Ekeler, and Kenyan Drake. Those are the guys that are really causing the biggest issues right now and the most questions because of where they are going. So let's talk about the guy with the highest ADP of all 9 of them right now, Dalvin Cook. Now here's the thing with Dalvin Cook. Last year, he was a must-have running back for us. We absolutely loved Dalvin Cook. This year, I still like him, but my concerns are a little bit more with him this year than they were last year. Now, his pros, obviously, he's an elite playmaker, both in the pass game and on the ground. He is one of the more dynamic running backs in all of football, and this is a scheme this year that is going to focus on the run game just as much as it did last year. Now, obviously, Kevin Stefanski is gone now, but they should still utilize the running back position quite a bit this season. But the injury concerns are something that continue to pop up about Dalvin Cook. So if you're taking a guy in the mid-first round, are you able to overlook those injury concerns? Last year, Dalvin Cook was a guy that you could get more towards the end of the first or early second. And when he's going in the early second round, you can take a little bit more of that risk, especially if you've already drafted a top-end running back 1 in the first round. That makes that a little bit easier to swallow. But the problem with him this year is if you're taking him at the 1.04, 1.05, you're going to have quite a few picks before it comes back to you, and you're going to have to use it probably on another running back just to make sure that you are safe with the position. Also this year, I think we need to keep a bigger eye on Alexander Mattison. Something that we could see happen with the Minnesota Vikings because of when Dalvin Cook started to really have his issues last year. Towards the end of the season, when they were going into their playoff run, that's when they are going to need him healthiest. So if the Minnesota Vikings decide, we don't need to give Dalvin Cook an entire workload all season long, they might pull him off the field a little bit more because they have got a guy in Alexander Mattison that is more than capable of shouldering some of that load. In limited time last year, running for Dalvin Cook, helping him get some plays off and get a breather, Mattison looked good. In those situations towards the end of games when it looked like it was out of reach and that the Vikings were going to have the game in hand, we'd see a little bit more Mattison than we would see Dalvin Cook. And some of the numbers even show that. Last year, his percentage of touches would go down from the first to the second to the third to the fourth. So as the game wore on, they got Cook off the field more and more and more. That could also end up happening this year. And those are my concerns with him. We haven't done a specific video on Dalvin Cook yet, but that is going to be coming up next week. So that is not going to be down below in the description, but keep an eye out on that. If you're wanting more Dalvin Cook, keep an eye out next week. If you haven't subscribed to the Fantasy Headliners, do that now so you can check it out when it hits. Now, the next running back in terms of ADP is Derrick Henry. Again, another must-have running back for us last year. Absolutely loved Derrick Henry. I think it was like a 2,000 or 3,000 word article on him last year on why people needed to invest. And people were scared. People did not want to do it. And he ended up being a huge hit for anyone that invested in him. So with Derrick Henry, the pros are pretty simple. He is the main option there with no threat behind him. And he, more than a lot of running backs in the NFL, is built to carry that huge workload. The dude is he is the definition of a power back that is built to be able to carry the workload, but he's not just a power back. The dude is so good. It is hard to believe that Matt LaFleur would give him and Dion Lewis the same amount of touches in certain weeks. I am so glad that LaFleur is gone. They walked away from Dion Lewis, and they finally moved to Derrick Henry last year and gave him that full workload. So some of the cons with Derrick Henry that come up, can Ryan Tannehill repeat his 2019 performance? And I talked about Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown already in another video, and I do have some concerns about Ryan Tannehill stretching the field. I'm going to talk about that more next week as well. But with Ryan Tannehill, is he going to be able to stretch the field as often? Is he going to be able to be as efficient stretching the field as he was last year? Is A.J. Brown going to be able to be as efficient after the catch as he was last year? 8.88 yards after the catch. More than double the amount more than 2 yards more than the next closest guy that had at least 80 targets. So he was highly efficient in the passing game. Jonnu Smith, is he going to step up this year and really help fill a void as a pass catcher? Can Corey Davis get healthy before the start of the season and be ready to roll and have a breakout? There are some questions on offense outside of Derrick Henry. They've also lost an offensive lineman this year. Jack Conklin ended up leaving, okay? He's gone at this point. So will that affect him? And not only that, but will the defense be as strong this year? The defense last year was pretty good. But, they walked away from a guy named Jarrell Casey. If you don't watch a whole lot of defense or do a whole lot of defensive studies, the name might not sound that important to you. But they traded him away, and he was a big run stopper. He was a really good, under-the-radar defensive lineman that really helped solidify the line. He's gone now. So will the defense be as strong? Because if the defense isn't as strong and they find themselves in the midst of more shootouts, are they going to be able to give the ball to Derrick Henry as much as they would like to? Now, if the defense is as strong and Ryan Tannehill can be efficient again, then there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Derrick Henry can be a guy that is going to get a ton of workload. And more than likely, he's one of the safest running backs that you could take this year because he's going to get a good amount of workload. He's not going to lose touches to other guys. They're going to at least start the game off running the football, pounding it, trying to win with their defense as much as possible. As the game goes on, if it starts to get out of hand, then at that point you see his touches scaled back. But every single week going into the game, you're going to know Derrick Henry is going to be the featured guy to start. And that's what makes him one of the safer ones. But he's got some pros and some cons this year that people are looking into. The next guy up, one of my favorites, and a guy that I feel like has a higher ceiling than only two other running backs in the NFL, and that's Joe Mixon. Absolutely love Joe Mixon this year. And I did a must-have video on him already that was one of the most in-depth pieces of information that I have ever put together. That video had both him and Josh Jacobs in it. It is deep diving statistical as you can possibly get. So if you're wanting to see that, again, it's down in the description below. Click on it when the video is done and go check that out. The pros with Mixon, kind of the same thing as it is with Derrick Henry. There's really no threat behind him. Yeah, they've got some guys on the roster. Gio Bernard is there. Rodney Anderson is there. Trayvon Williams is there. But nobody that's going to take a bunch of touches away. Only guys that are going to come in and supplement every once in a while. And they have said in recent weeks they want to get Joe Mixon more involved in the passing game. And with Joe Burrow there, a rookie quarterback, I've got it listed under the cons, but it could be a pro as well because he could dump down to Mixon a little bit more often. One thing I say about running backs is talent typically wins out. And one of the things with Joe Mixon is he's the most talented running back on the roster. So even if they don't have him on the field for designed passing attempts as much as maybe Gio Bernard, he's still going to be on the field the majority of the time, and he might get some of those unscripted dump-offs. Maybe he's the third or fourth option on that play, and Joe Burrow ends up finding him instead because he's dumping it down, just trying to, be safe with it. Maybe he's not having a great game, and he's like, I'm going to dial it back a little bit and not try to push the envelope too much. So those are the thing with some of these running backs. Yeah, you can talk about guys who are scripted into the game plan, but it doesn't always work out that way. So again, main option with no threat behind him, and he's got an upgraded offensive line this year. They get Jonah Williams back, which is great. Jonah Williams, first-round pick last year. He ended up missing the season. He's back this year. That's awesome. Yeah, he's basically going to be a rookie, a lot of people says, but no, he's not. He's a second-year player. He's been with this team. He's been studying the playbook. He's been with these coaches. He's been in this system. Even though he hasn't been on the field due to an injury, he's been there doing this, learning, bringing in the information. He knows the game plan. He knows the plays. He knows what his assignments are. He's just got to execute. And he's a really smart player. So I don't think there's going to be any issues with that. With Joe Burrow being a rookie, again, I talked about it kind of as a pro, but it could be looked at as a con as well. What if the passing game does struggle? What if there is an issue with Joe Burrow pushing the ball down the field and defensive teams decide, hey, we're going to commit to stopping the run and we're going to make Joe Burrow beat us. And if Burrow can't do it, then yeah, Mixon's going to be in some trouble at that point. And also, Mixon really hasn't shown a full season of what his ceiling is. The ceiling that we saw from Joe Mixon was basically the second half of last season. And in the video that I talked about, the must-have video, I gave you some more information on why that probably was. So make sure you head over to that video. Again, if you haven't seen it already, it's really in-depth. It gives you a lot of great stuff. But he had an ankle injury in week 1. That could have limited him throughout the season because in the second half after their bye, he looked a lot healthier and he was getting more touches. More touches, signaling maybe the coaching staff knew at that point he was healthier as well. So with Joe Mixon, even though we haven't seen a season where he's put together that full ceiling type performance, it could be coming very soon, and it could be this year. And part of the things that you can do to be a good fantasy football owner is taking calculated risks before other people. I mean, it was something that we preached last year. We preached it with Nick Chubb. We preached it with Derrick Henry. We preached it with Dalvin Cook. Yes, you would be taking risks with these guys. Even Acron Jones last year, he was a must-have running back for us. We were all over these guys, and we said it over and over. There's going to be some calculated risks with these players. But being able to take that calculated risk and dive into a player before the consensus wants to, before a majority of the other owners want to, will be great for you because you're going to hit on them before their ADP gets too high. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of these players this year, and that's what we'll see with Mixon next year. If this is the year and Mixon hits, Mixon could very well end up being a top 3 or 4 pick in 2021. There is a good chance that he could even go before Zeke next year if he hits. That's where this offense is headed. That's where this offensive line is headed. Make sure you go check out that video if you haven't seen it yet so you can see all that in-depth information. Boy, do we love Nick Chubb, okay? Everybody loves a little bit of Chubb, right? Well, we love Chubb at the Fantasy Headliners, and this year is no different. Some of the pros for Nick Chubb this year, he's got a new head coach, Kevin Stefanski. He brings a run-heavy scheme that we saw last year while it was in Minnesota. They absolutely utilized Dalvin Cook in every facet of the game, gave him a ton of touches on the ground, included him in the passing game. Kevin Stefanski wants his running backs involved, and Nick Chubb is going to get a majority of the carries on the ground. And on top of that, quite frankly, all capital letters, he's a beast. He is one of the most talented running backs in all of the NFL. If we were basing running backs based on talent alone, we'd be looking at this guy and saying, there's only a couple of other guys ahead of him. And not only that, but if Kareem Hunt weren't there, Nick Chubb is probably the 4th overall pick this year. He probably goes after Zeke. And honestly, me personally, if there was no Kareem Hunt, he would go before Zeke. Nick Chubb would be my running back 3 if there was no Kareem Hunt in Cleveland. But there is. And that does hurt some of his upside. But that really wasn't an issue last year in the second half of the season as much as people would want you to believe. In the second half of the season, was he on the field as much? No, but he was still carrying the football. So he's going to be a very, very safe option for you. You're just going to have to understand if you draft him, you're not going to get nearly as much upside as you would with some of these other running backs. And really, Baker Mayfield needs to step up. Okay, we were all over the Bake Show last year. Now the Bake Sale, because you can get him at such a discount. People are kind of jumping off the bandwagon. But last year, it wasn't really Baker Mayfield's fault. Yeah, he could have played a lot better, but Freddie Kitchens was a mess. Okay, he was a huge mess. It's just, if you're putting your players in a position to fail, no matter how good they are, no matter how much talent they are, they're going to fail quite a bit. And that's what happened with Baker Mayfield last year. Because the play calling was so inconsistent, because Freddie Kitchens was trying to do different things and outsmart the opponents, he should have just really been handing the ball off to Nick Chubb as much as possible and putting Baker Mayfield in situations to win. Like when they were doing play action. He was one of the better play action quarterbacks last year. They didn't do it nearly enough. They should have done it more. But Freddie Kitchens, instead of just rolling with what was working, he tried to become some wizard. He tried to become a wizard that he really wasn't. Okay, he tried to prove to people that he was the guy to lead this team when they were struggling. So he wanted to get creative with the playbook, and he shouldn't have done any of that. This is a different team, a different head coach. These are really, really good players that are around Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's going to eat again this year. If you're okay with dealing with a limited upside, that's all right. He's your guy. A guy that we were all over last year and absolutely loved, Acron Jones, not loving him nearly as much this year. But, I mean, he's a really, really good player. He should still be the starting running back. The one thing that I'm saying about Acron Jones is he's still going to be the starting guy. He's going to receive a majority of the workload on the ground. But it's the fact that he might be a little bit more limited in the passing game. Okay, Matt LaFleur, again, I mentioned him a little bit ago with Derrick Henry. I mean, this is a guy that had Derrick Henry on his team, and he gave Dion Lewis the football a lot. Way more than he should have. He's got Acron Jones on his team, and he's probably going to give Jamal Williams the football more than he should. Not only that, but they decided to spend a pick on A.J. Dillon, for Christ's sake. What he was thinking with the A.J. Dillon pick, I'll never fully understand. But I regress. Okay, so let's talk about the pros a little bit longer. Okay, so he should still be the starting running back. So pretty much anywhere outside of in between the goal line and the 10-yard line, Acron Jones will likely be on the field for 60% of those snaps, if not more. And not only that, but he is the most talented running back on this team in terms of the passing game. I mean, this is a guy that can be a dynamic pass catcher. I really hope they put him in the slot a lot. If they were to put him in the slot and then put Jamal Williams or A.J. Dillon in the backfield, that's perfect. If they were to put Acron Jones in the slot, he's probably a mid-running back 1 for me, but I just don't know if they're going to do that. I honestly don't think Matt LaFleur is a smart enough head coach to put Acron Jones in that type of a position to win. The cons, it is a 3-headed backfield. There's not a whole lot of fantasy superstars you see these days that are playing in backfields where 3 guys are going to get quite a bit of touches. And he's going to lose a lot of goal line carries to A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon's a beast. He is a guy that is the definition of a short yardage goal line type back. That's why I think Acron Jones still gets a ton of workload. He's just going to lose a lot of those touchdowns. I mean, this is a guy that scored a tremendous amount of points based on goal line and red zone carries last year. And if he loses those, he could lose more than half of his touchdowns from last season. If that happens, then instead of looking at like a high running back 1 we saw, he's more than likely a mid running back 2, and that's where I'm going to have him. And that's why some of those cons concern me. Even though he is the most talented running back there, I don't trust his head coach to treat him as such. One of the biggest hype names this offseason is Miles Sanders. People love Miles Sanders, and trust me, we love Miles Sanders as well. Jake had him on a must-own video last week. Again, link down below in the description. So if you want some more in-depth information on Miles Sanders, make sure you check that out. You know, the good thing is he had a strong end to 2019. Coaches have already said that Sanders is ready to carry a full workload. They have said this is a guy that we think is going to carry a full workload, that is going to be out here on the field a majority of the time. And we see that with him. We see that he can be a dynamic running back, both on the ground and in the air. But as a rookie last year, he lost a lot of touches to begin the year to Jordan Howard. Now, Jordan Howard is not washed up, okay? I mean, he's a guy that we like this year. He's a guy that still, played pretty decent last year in the time that he was healthy and wasn't injured. But there is a little bit of a trend here. So at the beginning of the season, we see this split where Jordan Howard's getting a lot of touches, but they're working Miles Sanders in and out. Jordan Howard goes down and we're like, oh, hey, Miles Sanders show. This is going to be a guy that's going to get all the touches. He's going to see a bunch of work in the passing game, a bunch of work on the ground. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, Boston Scott becomes a thing in PPR leagues. What is that? Why would that happen? So even though Miles Sanders had a strong end to 2019, Doug Peterson is a guy who famously has always wanted to have some sort of a committee type approach. He hasn't wanted to always pick one running back to take a full workload. But we don't know how much that is with Miles Sanders. That's the question. If Miles Sanders is getting a majority of the touches on the ground, that's great. He becomes a really safe player. This is a really good offensive line. The defense shouldn't be too bad this year. They don't really have a whole lot of weapons at wide receiver right now. Alshon Jeffrey's hurt. Marquise Goodwin has opted out for the season. Jalen Reagor, who I absolutely love, is a rookie, but still, he is a rookie. No rookie camp, limited training camp, no preseason. We've been hitting that over and over and over and over in all of our videos the last few weeks. I feel like a broken record with it. But still, it might take him a little bit to kind of get going. Deshaun Jackson, is he going to be the same guy? Does he still have that speed? Can he be an elite playmaker? So there's a lot of questions in the passing game. So if Miles Sanders is getting fed the ball quite often, it's going to make him a safe running back. Based on carries alone, he's a guy that definitely is a running back too. A safe running back too. It's that ceiling that we got to be worried about. How often are they going to use Boston Scott? How often are they going to give passing down work to other running backs? If they don't, Miles Sanders is a locked and loaded running back 1 every single week. But it might be a few weeks into the season before we figure that out. So that's one thing that you're just going to have to keep in mind with it, is how much of a risk are you willing to take with Miles Sanders? For me, definitely a lot of upside there. I like Miles Sanders. What about Josh Jacobs? Josh Jacobs is a guy that, last season people were like, during the season, oh, Josh Jacobs is a beast. He's going to be one of the next big things. Then the end of the season comes. He does break down a little bit, misses a couple of games. And then all of a sudden this offseason is like, can he really be that guy? That's what absolutely infuriates me about recency bias, okay? If he had a full healthy 16 games, Josh Jacobs is being drafted this year with absolutely no concerns whatsoever. He did. He had a heavy workload last year. He was on pace to be right around, if not over 300 carries. They were working him on the ground. They fed him like a true workhorse running back. And on top of that, here in 2020, they've added weapons to help take focus on the run game. I did a video on Patreon breaking down Raiders game film a few weeks back. And you could just see from the game film that Josh Jacobs was so good at finding holes and having that burst of acceleration through the holes that if they had some added offensive weapons to help pull some of those safeties away, to keep the corners away, to keep linebackers from keeping their eyes in the backfield, if they would have had some better weapons, Josh Jacobs would have had just a huge season last year. And with those added weapons, that's what can end up happening this year. And we're not talking just about the pass catching. We'll talk about that in a minute. But with Josh Jacobs, he's going to be the main guy. He's going to be getting a majority of that workload. You have Henry Ruggs there now. You have Bryan Edwards, who I like a lot. Tyrell Williams is there still. Hunter Renfrow is there. So they have enough weapons. Oh, Darren Waller. Can't forget balls to the Waller, right? They have balls to the Waller still. They have all these guys in the passing game that can now help. The big thing is with a guy like Henry Ruggs, he is so fast that he is going to have at least one guy committed to him the entire game, and then potentially a backup from the safety. Because Ruggs is a guy that can burn any cornerback in the league. And if you get burnt, then you got to have a safety over the top to help out. So now you have to dedicate potentially two guys to Henry Ruggs to keep an eye on him. You have Tyrell Williams on the other side. You have Bryan Edwards on the other side too. Bryan Edwards, he's going to be coming up in an episode here shortly next week. These are all guys that can do different things on the field and really expand the depth of the defense. And what I mean when I say expand the depth of the defense is when you don't have those weapons to pull people down the field, they start to collapse into the box a little bit more. And that's when you start getting more and more 8+ defenders in the box. But not only that, you get the safeties that creep closer to the line. You get a little bit more one-on-one coverage on the outside. Linebackers don't necessarily have to pay attention to certain players. They can focus on the run game and keep their eyes in the backfield a little bit more. You're not going to be able to do that with the Raiders here in 2020. Now, as far as the pass catching goes, they have added some players to potentially help in that area. But I'm not overly concerned about it. Josh Jacobs is a guy, when we were at the Combine, we were there for Mike Mayock's interview and press conference. And I mean, at that point, he said, we want to work Josh Jacobs into the passing game more. A few weeks ago, John Gruden said, we want to work Josh Jacobs into the passing game more. Yeah, there is such a thing as coach speak, but they've been saying it for a while now that they would like to get him involved more. And even if it's only an extra maybe 10 or 15 targets, his work on the ground alone could be more than enough to make up for all of that. And he did break down a little bit at the end of 2008 and 19. He's not a guy that's had a whole lot of workload in college, but he's a guy that knew this offseason, now having a full training program from an NFL team, he could do it a little bit differently than he did when he was in college, which is always good. Maybe he was able to add a little bit more muscle, or maybe he was able to change his diet up a little bit, or did some different agility exercises instead of weight training. So there's a lot of different things that you can do at that point to help keep yourself in a little bit better shape for that. And Josh Jacobs may be in that type of shape now. It's something to keep an eye on, but I'm not staying away from him for those reasons. A guy that I'm absolutely loving that people continue to pass over is Austin Ekeler, and I don't understand why. I mean, this is a guy that is now the lead back with little competition. I mean, Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, are those really guys that are going to take Austin Ekeler off the field more than what Melvin Gordon did last year? No, not even close. And he's highly efficient. I mean, this is a guy on a per-touch basis last year, was one of the best running backs in the league. He was an absolute stud when he touched the football. And have you seen the guy work out? I mean, come on. Who doesn't love a good workout video of a football player, okay? Dude's shredded. He is built and ready to roll to take on a larger workload in the run game this year. And yeah, he hasn't carried a full workload in the NFL yet, and that's what a lot of people are saying right now is the issue. We haven't seen it from Austin Ekeler before, so we're concerned about it. Austin Ekeler, for me, I'm smashing that pick in the second round. If he's on the board, if I'm picking in the late second, in the late first, and I pick a running back, I will go Austin Ekeler in the beginning of the second, and I won't even care. I absolutely love Austin Ekeler this year. Has he not carried the full workload? No, but that's the biggest argument against him right now. But he is a guy that had well over 200 carries 3 of his 4 years in college. So he's had over 200 carries in a season before. Different level, but he's still a guy that's been used quite often. And will Tyrod Taylor be good enough to keep the focus on the run game? I believe so. I believe yes. He will be good enough, just good enough to keep the focus off the run game. Is Tyrod Taylor going to be Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson? Is he going to be any of those guys? No. Okay, no. I'm not trying to say that. But he needs to do just enough. If he can get the ball to Mike Williams, to Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, fingers crossed he's healthy all year, my boo Hunter Henry, okay? If he can do that, then that opens up more than enough room for Austin Ekeler, okay? Because honestly, Phillip Rivers last year is not the same Phillip Rivers from the last several years. And the difference between Tyrod Taylor and Phillip Rivers now is not very much, to be honest with you. And I don't know if anyone wants to fight with me over that. We're not throwing fists here, people. But if anyone wants to argue that with me, I don't know if it'd necessarily be an argument. But my opinion is that the current Tyrod Taylor is not worse than what we saw last year from Phillip Rivers, and Phillip Rivers is not extensively better than what Tyrod Taylor is. And yes, I know I've been calling him Ty God basically the entire time, because that's the thing here, okay? You got to call him Ty God Taylor if you're going to talk about him. But Austin Ekeler, he's got some pros and cons, but he's still a guy that I like. Now, what about Kenyan Drake, all right? Last year's end of the season darling, Kenyan Drake gets traded to Arizona, comes out of nowhere, and just smashes fantasy football dreams. Because if you were able to pick up Kenyan Drake, you may have ran the table on some people that were not expecting it, because he was great at the end of the season. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. The Cardinals invested in him this year. They had to re-sign him to a pretty decent deal to keep him around this year and keep him on the field. And they did that. They invested in him. There wasn't a whole lot of back and forth. They wanted to bring him back, and they did that. And this is possibly an elite level offense. Cliff Kingsbury got a ton of crap when he came to the NFL last year. And part of that's Chip Kelly's fault, okay? Because people looked at Chip Kelly and said, oh, same situation over again. College coach coming in here. Things he can bring his fancy smanchy offense in, and they were not bad last year. For a rookie quarterback in Kyler Murray, an offensive line that really wasn't that great, and, to begin the season, a David Johnson that was, pretty good, but then he got hurt and you were missing him. They were still a pretty good offense. Cliff Kingsbury did not get enough credit for the offense they had, and it was overshadowed because, honestly, their defense was crap. Now, the defense will be a little bit better this year. Kyler Murray's got another year on the offense. They've added DeAndre Hopkins. The only thing that really worries me is the offensive line for the offense as a whole, not necessarily just Kenyan Drake, but we'll come back to that in just a second. Kenyan Drake has never really been the lead back for an extended period of time in the NFL. I mean, there was a time a couple of years ago where he got the workload at the end of the season with Miami, and that was great because going into the next year, you're like, oh, Kenyan Drake's going to be the guy. Well, no, hold on. Pump the brakes. They signed Jordan Howard, and they brought Jordan Howard in. And it's like, not Jordan Howard, Frank Gore. I'm sorry. They brought Frank Gore in. They're all running together now. Guys that have been sticking around that no one's really talking about right now. Okay, they brought Frank Gore in. They bring Frank Gore in, and it's like, I thought Kenyan Drake was supposed to be the guy. What is this? So did Miami not believe in him? That was Adam Gase, so it doesn't surprise me that he was just making a boneheaded decision. But, Kenyan Drake is a guy that, has shown flashes. He's shown the ability to be highly efficient. But with the volume, will he continue to be as efficient? That's a concern for me. So when I take a look at all these backs, Kenyan Drake is, kind of the last one I'm targeting in terms of this second tier outside of Aaron Jones. I've got him ahead of Aaron Jones right now. But back to the offensive line, it's not going to be great this year. Don't kid yourself if you think this offensive line is upgraded and ready to take on the task. It's going to be tough for this offensive line and for this offense this year to keep Kyler Murray healthy. Now the good thing is Kyler Murray can run. I mean, he can scramble, he can run, he can get away from that pass rush. He can do all those things. That's good for Kenyan Drake. He could see a little bit of extended time in the passing game. But don't forget, Eno Benjamin's there too. Eno Benjamin isn't my favorite running back in the world, but he is a guy that was recruited to Texas Tech by Cliff Kingsbury when Cliff Kingsbury was at Texas Tech. That's why they drafted him, because he's familiar with Eno Benjamin. He likes Eno Benjamin. He couldn't get him to Texas Tech. He ended up going to Arizona State instead. So now he gets a second shot, and he brings over to Arizona with him. So I don't mind that draft pick. But more than likely it was made because they plan on putting him in the game a little bit. And Chase Edmonds is still there. Chase Edmonds is another guy who, at times when he's had to fill in, has looked pretty good. So you've got some guys there that, aren't scrubs. You've got some guys that can help out. So if Kenyan Drake were to go down and miss some time, if he were to have a rough start to the year, maybe that offensive line isn't good, Kenyan Drake just isn't getting going, does that become a concern? Do they start working some of those other running backs? How short is that leash with Kenyan Drake? Those are some questions that you've got to ask. But hopefully all of this information helped you out. Again, this was really talking about the pros and cons of each running back, not really diving into those statistics to help you make, a bigger, deeper decision. But that's why I'm going to link a bunch of those videos down below in the comment section, or not in the comment section, down below in the description. So do me a favor, in the comments down below, let me know, out of all these guys I listed, who's your number one pick? Okay, tell me the guy that if you could pick between any of them, the guy that you are putting on your team. Do me a favor, leave that down in the comments below. And of course, hit that like button if you appreciate the content. And if you're new to the Fantasy Headliners and you've not subscribed yet, do that right now. Turn on the bell notification so you know when all of our awesome content drops, and become a part of Headliner Nation today. I appreciate you all. Thanks for tuning into this episode. We're getting close, only a few weeks away before the NFL season. I can feel it in my loins, people. It's getting close. So take care, stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.